We have reached the end. We have reached the M in transform, which stands for make peace. This is the end of the first two big sections of the book that basically contain all of the work, all of the stripping back who you are, discovering why you are the way you are, and then rebuilding yourself to be who you really want to be. The last part of the book talks about big topics in the world that this work applies to, which we'll get onto in future episodes. But for the purposes of the main work that I do with my coaching clients, this is the end of it. And as I say, it stands for make peace. So where does this all take us? It all takes us to a point where we want to be more at peace with ourselves, more content, more at peace with the outside world. And it's something, it's interesting. I was just looking at the work some other coaches do this week, life coaches in inverted commas, and it's something I just don't like that phrase. This is one of my stories. The story in my head when I hear the phrase life coach is someone who's done a weekend course and then runs around telling everyone to love themselves and be happy and be more positive. And when people ask me if I'm a life coach, I always say no for that reason. The work I do is just couldn't be further from that. If you've followed this all the way through, maybe you disagree with that. Let me know in the comments what you think this stuff sounds like. For me, this is actually about getting into a lot of the darkness in ourselves, understanding the dark side of humanity and the dark side of what we are like as human beings and the flawed sides, so that we can go into that darkness and then come back out into the light, to be profound about it. And ultimately, where this goes to with everything, and this is something I love about the work I do, and something that people say to me often, people I coach, often people will say to me they've worked with therapists and they've worked with other coaches, and one of the problems is they will get to a point where they just don't know what practically to do. They have talked about emotions and they've talked about all of this stuff, and then they'll be like, right, I get it, I understand it, what do I do next? And the therapist says back to them, no, it's not my job. Like, you just feel more of the emotion. And that's just not the way I operate. So this stuff for me is about combining the psychology and emotional work with real life practical stuff. And ultimately what this comes down to, if you want to change your life, is practicing things in real life. So it's like anything. You can learn how to do anything in your head, but until you start doing it and practicing it, you won't get good at it. You can learn how to ride a bike in your head. You can learn how to play a guitar in your head. But the reality is, until you pick up that bike and get on it, until you pick up the guitar and start playing it, you can't learn how to play it properly. You can't learn how to ride it properly. So this is where we have to embrace the messiness, and this is all part of it. It's all about ultimately a choice. And I was thinking about this the other day. I was thinking about all the people who've come to me for help over the past 18 months. And then back in my old life, when I did business coaching and before that as a lawyer. And I was thinking, there's one difference. There's only one difference between people who change their lives and people who don't. There's just one thing. Can you guess what it is? It's really simple. The only difference between people who actually change their lives and people who don't is the people who actually change their lives really want to. That's it. That's it. At the end of the day, you can do all of this work and you can understand it all. And where you are left when you sit at the end of this chapter is what you want to do. And there's no judgment either way, because actually putting this stuff into practice in your life is tough. Up until this point, however old you are, you've been doing the same things over and over and over again. So to change those things and to change it not only in your life, but for the life you're in that's interconnected with loads of others, it's going to cause disruption. There are challenges with it. There's no point anyone telling you it would be easy. Goes back to something we said several episodes ago. It's simple, but not easy. All of this stuff that once you really embrace it and you learn about it, it's really simple. But putting it into practice, not easy. Learning to play the guitar, dead simple in practice. It's dead simple in your head, dead simple on paper. Learning it in practice takes time. It takes you going over and over the same things again and again and again. It's no different with this work. So what it comes down to for you, if you've been following this stuff, if you want to change your life, is how much do you want to change it? Do you really, really want to do it? Then I still come across many, many people now who watch these episodes or listen to stuff, and then they get to a point and they still get trapped in the loop. They still go back to the stories. Oh, my life is more difficult than other people's lives. I've got this thing happening. It's just a story. What they don't do is look at the challenges everybody else faces and thinks, what did they overcome to change their life? We make assumptions about how easy other people's lives are without really getting into it. So ultimately, it just comes back to what you want, and it goes right back to the beginning. So it's all about becoming who you really want to be and how much you want to become that person, how much you want to become the new version of you or the original version of you. That's what it is, really. It's going back to who you started out as before the world started building things and layering it on top. How much do you want that? And who is that person? And by doing this work and by building up our self-worth and by figuring out we are good enough, we slowly can build up to be that who we really want to be. So what are some ways to round off all of this stuff? What are some practical ways that you can make those last steps if you want to, or first steps? And one of the big ones, which we've touched on in previous episodes but never got into properly, is the power of vulnerability. So if you've never heard of Brené Brown, I would strongly recommend that you go and look up everything she's ever done. She's got multiple books, best-selling books. She has got 2 or 3 viral TED Talks. She's got a Netflix documentary. She's got her own podcast. There is endless content out there from Brené Brown. If you're not going to do anything else, go and watch her TED Talk on vulnerability, her TED Talk on shame, and the Netflix documentary. What she talks about is gold dust. And in my old life, if you just break it down to very basic stuff, when you've got low self-esteem, you build a big ego, you run around with this big ego and you think that that's the best and most powerful way to be in the world. Most of our world is just run by big egos. That's all it is. What I realized doing this work is, whilst you feel when you're doing that you've got this big coat of armor on, it's actually really brittle. It's very easy for people to break through that armor. And again, this is a phrase you'll have heard me said lots and lots of times. Counterintuitive. The counterintuitive thing about this is, it sounds like being vulnerable wouldn't be good for you at all. Well, how is being vulnerable better than having your coat of armor on? And the reality is, in my experience and in the experience of people I've coached, being vulnerable actually makes you absolutely impervious to any criticism. It makes you indestructible, because when you go into a situation, think of it like this. The way we've been built up in our lives is to go into all situations with our suit of armor on and a sword and a shield. And we're going into fight. What being vulnerable is going into the same situation, taking off your suit of armor and putting your sword and shield down and walking in and speaking to people, whoever it is. This applies to all relationships in your life, which ultimately is what life comes down to. And saying to them, look, I've started doing some work on myself. I've started reflecting on my life. I'm going to change things. I wanted to talk to you about it. And this is just one, this is the big topic. This could be anything. This could be, I'm unhappy at home and I need to talk to you. I love you, but I want to talk to you because I'm really frightened. I'm really worried about what's going to happen next. And I just want to come in as I am, completely exposed, and talk to you. In my experience, approaching conversations like that, instead of approaching them with aggression and anger and ego, which is what we tend to do, we tend to go into conversations with our loved ones, with employees, with bosses, with aggression, because our ego is up. And actually, when we get below that, going back to old episodes again, it's because we feel insecure. It's because we feel frightened. It's because we've got low self-worth. When we can start building on that and going in and saying, look, this is who I am. This is who I am. And I just want to talk openly and honestly about whatever the problem is, whatever the challenge is. It is absolutely gold dust in my experience, and something I can't do justice in 2 minutes of one episode. So I'd highly recommend you go and watch and listen to all the Brené Brown stuff. That alone can change your life. I go into more detail in the book about it. Other things to think about, little little things to start sort of just retraining your own mind, the way we think about things. There was a line I read, which I absolutely love. And I think it comes from, I'm trying to think on the spot now. I'm pretty sure it comes from Wayne Dyer. So spiritual coach, author. And something I loved, I heard this a couple of years ago and I use it in my own life now. And again, this helps from dropping our ego, being more vulnerable, being more open to being wrong about everything. Remember, it's our ego that always thinks we're right. It's our ego that always needs to be certain and in control. When we can let go of that, we find more peace, we find more contentment. And the line he would say is, no matter what someone said to him, maybe you're right. So he said, no matter, someone would come up to him and say, I've read your book. It's the best book I've ever read. It's incredible. It's changed my life. You're a genius. And he'd say, maybe you're right. And someone else would say about the same book, it was rubbish. It was shite. I didn't like it. It's a waste of money. It's a rip-off. And he'd say, maybe you're right. Because ultimately, they're all just stories anyway. It doesn't matter. I think that about, I've released this book. I released these podcasts, the YouTube videos. Some people love them. Some people won't. It's the same thing going out. The same video is being watched by multiple people. Some people will love it. Some people won't. They're all right. There's no point me getting upset about it. And for me to get upset about it, it's only my ego. It's only my ego that's bothered about it because I need to be right and it needs to be good. Goes back to all the stuff we've done. The more of this work you do, the more you can just say to people, maybe you're right. Think about the world we live in now. It's just full of everybody in black and white camps. No matter what the subject is, 2 camps. Each camp thinks it's absolutely right. Very few people will ever say, yeah, maybe, I don't know. I actually don't know. I can't be 100% sure. Go back to what we've talked about truth in the past. We talk about truth and lies, though that's black and white. It's not. It's on a scale. And as soon as we can start looking at that and saying, am I 100% sure this is right? Very rarely that we can be 100% sure of anything. And as soon as we can step back from that, then we can be more compassionate to ourselves, to other people, and say, maybe you're right. It makes your life so much easier. I keep saying to people recently, if I could boil down all of this work to one gesture, it would just be a shrug. That's it. That's how I live my life now. Just a shrug. When I'm at my best, who knows? Who knows what's right? Who knows what's wrong? Doesn't matter. Just get on with your life. People are generally good. When they're not, when people are acting in ways that you don't like, it goes back to all of this stuff. The only reason we judge other people is that we don't understand ourselves enough. We think other people are evil and we're not. We think other people are baddies and we're not. When you've done all of this work, you realize we're all the same deep down. We just don't see the parts of us that are like the people we don't like. Huge. Another part of this, two things that go together really. This work isn't about getting rid of all the problems in your life. There will always be problems. There will always be challenges. That's life. There is always light and dark. There has to be. There's always ups and downs. Think of it like your heartbeat goes up and down. And what happens if we flatten a heartbeat? We're dead. So we don't want to do that. But the heartbeat also looks like waves. So what we want to do is learn how to surf the waves. That's what this work is about. This is about learning how to be a great surfer so that when times are good, you enjoy it, you really, really savor it, and you know it won't last forever. And you know when you come down the other side, it's just part of the cycle. You've just got to go through it. You've just got to let it pass. Take it for what it is. Same when it comes to balance. People talk all the time about balance. And I always think it's really interesting because what they mean is staying dead center. They mean being in the middle of everything so they get it perfect. But when you stop and think about it, that's not what balance is at all. Think about someone on a high wire balancing, or even just stand on one leg and think about what balance really is. When you're balancing, you're so slowly shifting from side to side all the time. Every now and then you'll hit a sweet spot where you are perfectly in the center and you'll think to yourself, oh my God, I'm perfectly in the center. And then it'll go. Because we only get those moments briefly in our life. That's what balance is. So our life is generally just riding the waves, just going with it, moving with it, and then savoring the moments when we are right in the center, when we are at the crest of that wave. It's really important. And then the last few bits, something I heard a long time ago, which I really, really like, is from the Swiss-British philosopher Alain de Botton. And he said, basically, what humanity is, what adults are just children in grown-up bodies. And that's basically what we've got now. We've got a society full of children in grown-up bodies, because until you've done loads of this work, you're carrying with you loads of shit from your childhood that you've just never processed, and you don't know it, and most people don't know it. And once you've done it, it's clear as day. And when you've done this sort of stuff and you start looking at life like this, you start to realize that if you look at grown-ups as 4-year-olds, they make way more sense. I can see the 4-year-old in all the different people I know, and I can see why they do all the things they do. So all of a sudden, life isn't a mystery anymore, because humans are actually really predictable. Once you understand how humans work, we're really predictable. So you can look at someone, instead of being angry with them for the way they are, you can see how what they do is in you. You can understand why they are the way they are and why they do what they do. And all of a sudden, anger, resentment, frustration is replaced with compassion, because we understand each other better than we used to. Which brings us to the last 2 points. One is something a lovely guy I met a few years ago when I was in Bali, a story that always stuck with me. And he was telling me about experiences he'd had with a therapist, because he'd had problems with his dad growing up. And his therapist said to him, look, you're a grown-up now. And what you ultimately keep doing is going back to this same human who you call dad, and you're expecting him to be a different parent than the one he is. He is who he is. There's nothing he can do about it. Unless he does this sort of work, he's not going to change. But you keep going back to him, expecting him to change, expecting him to be a different type of parent. You're a grown-up. It's time now to be the parent to yourself that you wanted in the first place. And that's a huge message I take with me all the time. No matter what has happened to you in your childhood, no matter what has happened to you throughout your life, if you're a grown-up watching this or listening to this, it's about taking responsibility and starting to parent yourself in the way you always wanted to be parented. That's where all the multiple personality comes in. That's where thinking of yourself as the child, the little version of you inside, comes in. It's huge. And last but not least is one of the biggest things in this that we've talked about before, but it's worth rounding off on. The most important thing is to be kind to yourself. It is impossible to change your life without learning how to be kind to yourself. And it's impossible to be kind to other people without being kind to yourself first. You can do it temporarily, but it won't last. You can do it as a show, but it won't last. It won't be deep and meaningful. You need to be kind to yourself inside your own head. If you decide to change your life, you will make mistakes. It is as simple as that. Think about when you learn how to ride a bike, you will fall off the bike. It's all about getting back on the bike, trying again. You are undoing, ultimately, programming that's been put in place for decades to this point. So it takes time to undo that programming and to replace it with the new programming that we want to put in, the healthier stuff. And that is more achievable and will happen quicker if you're kind to yourself. Think of it as like a super program, and you're a laptop. And if you install the Be Kind to Yourself program first, it allows all the other new programs to come in quicker. Does that make sense? I hope so. I hope you've enjoyed going through each of the chapters. We will talk about more practical things and how it applies to real life in future episodes. If you enjoyed this, share it with someone else. If you want to get the free chapters, go to paul7cope.com/free chapters. See you soon.